Most welcome to this webinar session today. And as part of our ongoing effort to keep the deep reflections running onto our mainly for the leadership alumni, both illicit and LATIC, which we have delivered it over a period of 5 years so far, with 497 alumni, strong database or base of alumni across 16 countries and including African Union Commission. And one of the initiatives to sustain this leadership network, what we thought it's important to run key theme-based reflection for every month. So to start with this month, Feb, in fact, we have developed the key role of ICT and the teachers' capacity building. And so we have identified an expert, Dr. Raywat Deonandan, and so we have published his key credentials in our leadership network. So there is no need to introduce, it takes long intro. I need to go through all his credentials. So you also need to look at in depth to read through his high credential. That's one of the reasons we had to offer this consultancy to Dr. Raywat. So, and he is with us today for this 40 minutes interactive discussions. As you, at this point of time, very few of us in this session. So I hope more and more will join. In any case, we are recording this to share with all of you. You can look at it down the line. So with that brief intro, so let me hand over this floor to Dr. Raywat Deonandan. Raywat.
Thank you very much, Senthil. It is my deep privilege to be a part of this initiative, and I hope that it continues to flourish and grow because this is quite an exciting thing that you're doing. I want to start off by apologizing for the angle of my camera. It's at the bottom of my computer, and so you get an excellent view of my double chin, and I wish I had one that was at my eye level, but this is what we have to work with. So let me start by sharing the screen. Let me find my presentation. One second here, bear with me.
Yes.
Okay, that is the wrong screen. One more try at this. That is also the wrong screen. I'm trying to get the presentation screen. Please bear with me.
I could see a presentation screen, but not in the slideshow.
There we go. This is the right one. You can see the slideshow mode now? Fantastic. Thank you very much. So the title of my presentation is How ICT Can Elevate the Status of Teachers and Teaching in the SDG Agenda. And at this point, I want to remind us of what the SDG appropriate goal is for this presentation. That's number 4, to deliver a quality education and lifelong learning. And that to me is the key that drives this discussion, the lifelong learning aspect of this. Previously, when we had the MDGs, we're focused on basic education, fundamental basic education, right, for everybody. But now we're accepting that this must be a quality of life issue, something to do with the qualitative aspects of being a human being. And I think this is where ICT can best be interjected. And today's discussion will focus on the ways in which ICT can contribute to teacher social prestige in this idea around lifelong learning. So, how do we improve teachers' social status, which is the thrust and heart of this presentation? How do we improve their enthusiasm? How do we improve their sense of self-worth? And how do we improve their overall effectiveness as educators? I had a conversation about this very thing with the group of retired school principals a while back, and each person had the same conclusion. To do these things, especially improving status, we need to unleash their creativity. We need to take down the administrative and structural barriers that prevent educators from feeling their own sense of self-worth, their own power when it comes to being an educator, and hence their creativity. And I believe that ICT can help in this respect and ultimately lead to, again, improved social status, which will lead to better teaching and learning outcomes. So the thing about declining social status among educators is that it's a global phenomenon. It's not just about low-income countries. It's not just about African countries. It's actually a thing that every nation experiences to a lesser or greater degree. But it's particularly true in sub-Saharan Africa and in some key countries in South Asia as well. And we tend to notice it particularly in rural areas, at least as compared to more urban and developed areas, for reasons I think we can all understand. I'm going to show a series of graphs throughout this presentation. These are all taken from a paper that looked at the status of teachers from the perspective of educators' unions around the world. So this is representative of the entire nation, but your local experiences may differ to some extent. So here we see that their perceptions of the union members of the change in teacher status over the last 10 years shows that a large number believe that teacher status has diminished over the last 10 years in the eyes of their community members. Also, amongst those who think it has changed, the status of rural areas is diminished as opposed to urban areas. And by status, I mean the status of the teachers and the job that they're doing, the prestige that they experience in the eyes of their community members. What is the source of this diminishment of social prestige? Well, according to this particular survey, a lot of it has to do with mass media, images on television, radio, and movies about the job that teachers do. Some argue that we're in an anti-intellectual era where we're valuing folk wisdom more than deep learning. I don't know if that's true, but definitely we're seeing elements in mass media that may be pushing against our desire to uplift the status of teachers and thus their effectiveness as educators. So let's take a step back and think about the things that affect social prestige in general. We know in the social sciences that social prestige is associated with money, power, and fame. Three things that teachers tend not to have. Three things that very few of us in this call tend to have. Right? We're talking here about royalty, athletes, politicians, business tycoons, and so forth. So maybe we can't affect money, power, and fame, at least in the short term, for most educators globally, and ICT has a limited role to play in these endeavors. However, secondary factors that affect social prestige have to do with the amount of training one has, or at least perceived to have. So credentials matter, not just letters after one's name, but meaningful letters after one's name, and the extent to which that training can be translated into powerful action that is acknowledged as being representative of deep learning. As well, if you are perceived to have an impact on the lives of others, that is prestigious. Teachers obviously have an impact on the lives of others. What we need to do, of course, is to better express that fact and to have people better understand that fact. Which people? The teachers themselves. I would argue that it's important for elevating the social status of teachers for they themselves to build their self-esteem and to understand their role in larger society. So let's drill down to teachers' social prestige specifically. The previous slide talked about social prestige in general. Well, the things that literature suggests affect teachers' prestige, first and foremost, is low salary. If you don't think you're adequately paid for your job, you probably will not feel good about yourself. You probably will not do a good job. You probably not have a lot of enthusiasm, and that leads eventually to low social status. Related to this is the perception that many educators have that teaching is a job and not a career. What's the difference? A job is something you do for a salary that you take home at the end of the day and you don't think about in your off hours. A career is something that is part of your identity that you seek to invest in as you become a lifelong learner, that you take pride in, and that ultimately reflects upon those that you interact with. A career is a high social status phenomenon. A job, comparatively, is a low social status activity. And of course, again, the impact on the lives of students. If we as educators can improve our wherewithal, our skill set, our creativity, then we can transfer that energy, that puissance, that ability to the success of our students. And that ultimately leads to an elevation both of ourselves and of our communities. And I will argue that ICT has a role to play in all three of these endeavors. So what is ICT? As we all know, ICT is a variety of tools, of modes, of avenues. It can be very basic traditional technologies like radio, the TV, videotapes, audio tapes, DVDs. It can be as well the more advanced content areas or avenues like internet videos, podcasts, streaming blogs, webinars like this one right now, blogs, anything online. As well, it can be the vehicle that delivers these things, e-readers, mobile phones, laptops, desktop computers, that sort of thing. As I'm sure many people on this webinar are aware, we live in an amazing time when advances in mobile computing are outstripping previous technological changes in the history of human civilization. The power in my one mobile phone is many times, orders of magnitude greater than the computing power that took men to the moon in the 1960s. Not that I can launch a spaceship with my phone, but the innards, its potential, its ability to connect me with the rest of the world is something we never anticipated. So what we're sitting atop here is a mountaintop of potential that we need to unleash to enact positive change. What kind of positive change? Well, improving teaching outcomes through improving social status of educators. So one of the ways this can be done is through accessing professional training materials. Obviously, I'm talking about, first and foremost, formal distance learning. Through these technologies, through these avenues, we can empower teachers to improve their pedagogical training, to improve their certification through formal distance learning, but as well, they can use these technologies to improve the depth and quality and breadth of their teaching content areas. And that will lead to better teaching, therefore higher social prestige, etc. So, ICT offers access to a global quality standard in teaching. What do I mean by this? Prior to the advent of these technologies, a remote or rural educator was limited to his or her textbooks, his or her previous training, and probably could not access the cutting edge of pedagogical technique, or indeed news stories or narratives that he or she could take into the classroom. Some of the things that one can access now using ICT are culturally appropriate curricula. In the bad old days, we were stuck with whatever was left over in the old British textbooks. Now we don't need to do that. We can go online or buy videotapes and get curriculum that is appropriate for our communities. We can look up best practices in teaching. We can learn about the experiences of the best educators in the world, not just our colleagues and our friends, but the people in countries on the other side of the world. Now, as research into ICT technologies improves, one of the things that people look at are appropriate competencies. And one of the competencies that we think that teachers should embrace is the need for students to see teachers mastering technologies. So again, that means that even through the process of improving oneself as an educator, we are giving back to our students. We are investing in them through investing in ourselves, both through becoming better teachers, but also through serving as an example as a lifelong learner. Technologies grant access to teaching tools as well. Stories, narratives, exams, whatever it might be. Here are some examples that I've used in my teaching. So I found online videos for learning statistical techniques because I'm a biostatistician and I don't know everything.
E-learning mode, promotion of e-learning culture.
Hello.
And online webinar. Hello.
Hello, I'm hearing a voice. Okay, I'll continue talking.
I'm sorry. Please continue.
Oh, yes. Other examples include finding blogs and websites that describe science experiments. So if I'm teaching science in a remote area, it's difficult for me to think of inexpensive, effective ways to demonstrate things like chemical reactions. But I've gone online or I've gone to certain videos and found experiments that I can take into remote areas. I've done this. I've taken clever experiments into the depths of the jungles of Guyana to teach remote Aboriginal children there. I found those experiments using ICT. We can find teacher experiences for dealing with unusual learners. Who are unusual learners? Well, people with discipline problems or maybe different ways of thinking. As we know, Not every teaching modality is appropriate for everybody. It is ideal if we have a variety of strategies to accommodate the largest breadth of learners. Going online or accessing videos or TV shows or whatever it might be can help us do this. And lastly, examples for assessment tools. To me, this is one of the most challenging areas as an educator, is thinking of new ways to measure the success or productivity of my students. Exam questions are an obvious example. I often cannot think of enough exam questions to ask, so I have to search through my digital repositories, seek my colleagues around the world, and ask their opinions. In other words, for educational policymakers, encouraging the use of these technologies is an effective and economical way to help teachers unleash their innate creativity. The tool cannot do it alone. The tool is about empowering the teacher to find the power within his or herself to do this appropriately. An example that I want to talk about is DEEP. Now, I'm sure many people on this webinar have heard of DEEP. It's quite famous in the ICT community. It's Digital Education Enhancement Project. And in DEEP, teachers use handheld computers for their own professional development. The kinds of activities that they do could be annotating course content, seeing videos, teaching other teachers practice, and so forth. One of the surprising outcomes of DEEP was that teachers were collaborating more amongst each other. So the technology was not just about filling their mind with content or upgrading their teaching skills. It was about making connections between educators, and that, of course, accelerates greater professional growth. This also resulted in teachers being able to blend their own personal experiences with the formal curriculum. This is the hallmark of creativity. The second you introduce personal experience in an effective and seamless fashion, that creates a better engaged classroom, resulting in, of course, better learning outcomes. Here's an example from the DEEP website. A teacher was able to record a lecture by Mark Shuttleworth, who was a space tourist from South Africa. He then took that lecture back to his students in a remote part of South Africa, and they were enthused to be able to hear Shuttleworth's words directly and to see his images. And this image here shows one of their assignments that they put together as a result of that teacher bringing that cutting edge experience into the classroom. Here's a quote from one of the teachers that was from the DEEP project. "I am now constantly finding things that extend my knowledge as a teacher, making me really grow professionally. That to me is the essence of the power of ICT when it comes to social prestige. This individual is growing professionally, meaning he is no longer just experiencing a job, he is knee-deep in a career that will lead to greater opportunity and a greater sense of self-worth, therefore probably greater engagement with his community." Let's talk a little bit about salary. So according to these stats, again, teachers' salaries over the past 5 years have either remained the same or have diminished somewhat. And that's not a good news for anybody, because we know that salary scale is linked to qualification, to credentials. So if you are a remote educator or an educator in an area with not a lot of opportunity for professional development, you're probably disadvantaged when it comes to upgrading your salary. This is where distance learning can come to play. An example I will tell you about is something called BAT, the Blended Approach to Teacher Training, something that UNESCO is doing in Jordan. And BAT uses video modules, discussion boards, in addition to face-to-face, real-time, in-person meetings to help improve teacher credentials. The idea here is that we can invest in people, particularly educators, using these technologies to both upgrade their skills and to formally accredit them. And that, hopefully, can lead to a better competitive job market and advancement in salary, and therefore social prestige. Here's a quote from a Chinese teacher in rural parts of China who was exposed to ICT. "I now really understood the difference between teaching as a job and as a profession. That's the recurring theme here, transforming educators from simply doing a task to engaging in a lifelong career that upgrades their skill set and their attitudes about themselves and their communities." So, continued professional development leads to better teaching. This is borne out by the literature. It might even lead to a better salary. No guarantees there, but it certainly doesn't hurt. And that will lead to better student outcomes. Better student outcomes then lead to an improved society in general. In other words, investing in professional development through ICT benefits the community as a whole. So, what are the challenges? I will submit that the challenges to implementing ICT as a prestige vehicle include infrastructure challenges, literacy challenges, fear, and so forth. So, when it comes to infrastructure, it's important to remember that ICT is not just about the internet. It can be a television, it can be videotape, anything that involves some sort of digital technology. Technological literacy is important, so it's important that we have startup investments in teacher training. Fear, how do we address fear? Well, we have to invest in peer encouragement. So the more we invest in educator community, the less likely it is we have to target individual educators to get them over their inherent fears in technology. By cultural inertia, I mean a deep-seated unwillingness to change. And that's something every profession deals with when introduced with new technologies and opportunities. And again, one way around this is teacher education and peer investment. And lastly, do your colleagues, your coworkers, the people in your community support your desire to invest in your career? Well, again, this is where we have to highlight the need for peer encouragement. Let's talk a bit about the comments from the blog that I posted a couple weeks ago. Some people are very kind to leave comments for me, and among them is this first one by John, who says that the core principles of excellence in the e-world are the same as in the physical world. That's true. So ICT is not a band-aid, well, it's not a cure-all, and it's not a band-aid either. It's simply a tool. We have to remember that we're still dealing with people, and people have flaws, but people fundamentally just need additional tools to bring out the core creativity in themselves. Someone else commented that in Africa, we have infrastructure issues. That's true. And this is where I think the policymakers can really step in and direct appropriate resources to laying down a solid infrastructure for digital communication, as it will pay dividends down the line. Someone else points out that ICT is also powerful for rendering economic benefits. I love this comment. And I'm glad that it was made, because it's important to remember that this is not just an investment in teachers, it's an investment in community and an investment in overall community wealth if you play the long game. And someone else points out that this is not just about teacher training, it's about collaboration. And I mentioned this from the DEEP project as well, where participants found that they were more likely to collaborate amongst themselves, and that led to a greater sense of accomplishment, therefore prestige, therefore better learning outcomes. So in conclusion, I believe that we can improve teacher prestige by unleashing the innate creativity in each person. Professional development can help us transform a job to a career. And if we do these things, we're improving teacher self-esteem, and literature suggests that this results in better student outcomes in general. ICT, I argue, plays a role in all of these steps, but it's important to remember this is a tool, not a perfect solution. Ultimately, we're investing in people here through the investment in technology. Thank you. So let's look at